Are you fit and ready to go on this? For a hard day's lawyering?
I'd sort of try and come home early. I live in North London. I try and come home early to beat the rush hour, and then the hard day's lawyering regrettably continues.
Follows you, yeah.
It does, sadly.
Oh dear. Well, it was your choice, wasn't it? You still
Well, I'm not moaning. I'm just stating with the facts regarding what happens in the day, really.
what it's a very odd combination, isn't it? The kind of exciting lifestyle of a DJ and the kind of intensely process-driven lifestyle of a lawyer.
It is. I think, but there's a bit of yin and yang to it in that to be successful as an artist, you have to be a little bit selfish, dare I say it. And it's an unfortunate admission, but I just, I've known multiple very successful artists in my life, and it's the one sort of common thread that runs through everybody. And therefore to kind of just leave your ego and your metaphorical looking in the mirror at the door and focus on others and the careers of others, or the thinking the same thoughts but completely pointing them in the direction of others, is very, not only is it good karma, I actually really enjoy it for that reason.
That's amazing. I would never have thought of that. Well, the business side of things, let's face it, we all know people who've been ripped off massively, in the music business. I kind of avoided it to a certain extent, but I mean, good Lord, in the 80s, and obviously you're more of a 90s dude, but certainly in the 80s, the whole of the music industry was awash with cash, really, wasn't it? It was just everybody was making money, really, and so people didn't have their eye on the ball. I don't think so much then. I think they do now.
Yeah, I think they're kind of forced to. I was probably one of the most dangerous people out there in the deals I did in the 90s and the noughties, the record deals and the publishing deals, which was so a kid with a law degree who thinks he's a lawyer. And I really, it was only when I sort of bit the bullet and decided, actually, I'm not capable of understanding these contracts. Well, many years prior to being a lawyer, and actually engaged a third party lawyer, that things started to improve. But it was almost like emperor's new clothes. I dared not admit that I actually didn't understand things, because I went to a fairly prestigious university, and
LSE, yeah,
and I went to a degree. I got a degree in law. So, and I was, I like to keep the judge name very distinct from my career as a lawyer, because I might get in a bit of trouble about it otherwise. But you've got this name, so there is plenty of reasons or there were plenty of reasons to bluff it at the time. But actually, in a perverse sort of way, it was one of the main motivations to become a lawyer, because I signed these crap deals, because I dared not admit that I didn't know what I was doing, and then to kind of stop people making the same mistakes I did. But also, I think one of the, I have been lucky enough to know a lot of successful, but not just DJs, but musicians in my life, and actually, I think almost all of them are pretty commercially savvy. Which isn't to say that they would do all of the commercial nitty gritty themselves. That's what they have managers and accountants and all the rest of it for. But ask them to make decisions on the key strategic elements of their business, to understand branding, to understand, rights periods, all the kind of core stuff. Just about every successful artist that I've known gets it completely. So, part of my sort of evangelical message is to make people realize, because you get a lot of entry level musicians who think that getting a manager is, if you like, the gateway to heaven, and because your manager is going to do it all for you, so you can just focus on making the best music you possibly can. But, well, I'm afraid to sort of break it to you that is not going to work. You really do have to be, in addition to the modern ways of the music industry, where you have to be an exceptional DIY brander, creating this marketplace for yourself before a record company would even go and sign you, irrespective of how good your music is. You've also got to have a savvy understanding of the way the business works. And so that's my sort of you know, if you were to sum my message up in a few short sentences, that would probably be it.
Yeah. Don't you think it's an enormous amount of pressure to put on young people who are struggling just to make the music, as good as they can? I mean, I do quite a lot of mentoring on the Talyard course, as you know, probably, education course, and I find that a lot of young people, and really the talent is only, as we know, only part of it, but they just are so overwhelmed with having to be the jack of all trades. It's just yet another thing that's piled onto people all the time. It's like, yeah, I know. When you get beyond a certain point, you can get people like you to help with the nitty gritty and make sure you get a decent deal and stuff. But it's just such a lot. We didn't have that pressure when I was growing up in the 80s in the music industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I had the luxury. I'm very familiar with your career. I was actually a really big Heaven 17 fan. And
I'll give over.
I've got the 10. I've got the box set with all the 7 inches. I've
Really?
from where I grew up. So, and the similar, to an extent, there's a parallel between what you did and I did, is that we were there, you know, probably more by design than by accident, but we were there early within a genre. And if you're early within a genre, it's much, much easier to create a brand for yourself. And I got, you know, moving over to me rather than talking about my enormous love and dancing around to your records, I got in there from if you like, the warehouse parties of the late 80s into the acid house era of the late 80s, when there was a small market for what I was doing. I was lucky enough to be in there early, just caught the bug, you know, we all have a few eureka moments wherever you are in the creative community. Mine were going to certain gigs, going to New York, going to the Paradise Garage, and I was lucky enough to be there early. And therefore it was easier, you know, add that to a small amount of talent, I wouldn't want to go further than that, and a decent understanding of branding, and you're ahead of the game already. Now, of course, now with 60,000 Spotify releases at most recent count per day, it is significantly more difficult to create a branding position for yourself. But at the same time, you've got to understand branding, whether you see it from a very cold kind of business-like marketeer's perspective, or whether you just are very good at leveraging whatever point of difference you have about your career and your artistic identity. It's never been more important than now. But you're absolutely right. It is piling pressure on artists, and it is. I'd have to be honest and say there are certain genres of artists who've got more pressure on them. For example, female solo artists is the most oversubscribed area of music by some distance. Which it won't be much consolation to a prospective budding female solo artist listening to this, but that's the truth. So there's all the more reason under those circumstances to create a point of difference. But then also, if you think about it, there haven't been that many hugely commercially successful sort of rock, either sort of heavy or commercial rock bands in the last sort of 15 years either. So there are certain areas of music where you've got to try that much harder, and dare I say it, there's got to be some luck. There has to be some luck in any sphere of the arts. But it really, that DIY branding thing, and I frequently have this conversation. I've got, as a lawyer, more so really than as a DJ. As a lawyer, you have certain artists that you think are truly special. You mentor from an early stage, and you hope that they go on to be something. But the one bit of advice, you know, this advice about DIY brand building is so easy to exhale from one's lips, but so very difficult to actually do if you're an artist, because it may not come naturally to you, and there are so many different bricks that exist within the wall of brand building, and unless you're prepared to kind of, using my rather silly metaphor, continue kind of bricklaying in a number of different directions, it is complicated, and there is no substitute for it, though, because no manager, really no serious manager, is likely to want to entertain you unless you've done an element of that. No bigger record label is likely to want to entertain you. You might be lucky enough to go with a smaller record label, and of course self-release when you've done no brand building is a bit of a waste of time, in my view.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but there's a lot of young artists who have been sold the dream that, you know, somehow just to drop a single is enough, and it's so obviously not. In fact, it may even be harming your prospects, you know, because it's not just about issuing it forth to the world, as we all know, is about how do you drive traffic to listen to it, even though it exists, is a real problem because we're in a situation. I mean, obviously you've been a radio DJ for a very long time, and there's playlists, and we all know it's well documented the kind of I'm calling it degradation. You don't have to. I'm calling it the degradation of kind of playlisting, which is much more concerned with, kind of online popularity now, it seems to me, than any kind of taste making. Which is ironic because you're a tastemaker, right? What's your view on all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's two elements to playlists, and I couldn't say which applies to each given play. There's kind of algorithm driven playlists, and there's curated playlists, and probably there's a bit of both in the case of many of Spotify's own playlists. So I'm not wholly anti playlists, although there are other aspects of playlists I find a bit distasteful artistically. For example, I mean, I'm more au fait with it. My legal practice covers way more than just electronic music, but electronic music is obviously in my DNA. It's what I've done for years. And if you look at just about all the key Spotify electronic music playlists, every version is 2 minutes 50 long. And anybody who knows anything can tell you that electronic music does not lend itself very well to such a short representation. But of course, that ties into the fact that it has been shown that people kind of stick or twist, they kind of play or they click to move on within such a short period of space of time, and therefore that's what people, producers and record companies, feel obliged to do. But it's artistically, I don't think that's fabulous. You do tend to find some other slightly less more buried in that great sea of playlists, entities that will play the full length of things or longer versions, but certainly Spotify's own playlists in the area in electronic music don't do it at all, which is quite disappointing. I mean, I don't mind the curation because I have encountered and via sort of connections, I know other people who are very well connected within Spotify, and I know that there are genuinely passionate people within Spotify putting these playlists together. So I don't want to be wholly.
No. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's not just like a simple good versus evil thing. It's just I find a general level of disappointment in as much as it's, the more that we move towards a kind of metricized, measured approach to something which is essentially subjective, then that means that it's going to be about commerce more and more and more and more. Now, it's always been about commerce, I know that, but this basically the whole process is squeezing randomness out of the system, and the randomness is where the exciting stuff happens, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't argue with that, and obviously, if there is an identikit record that does well according to the algorithm of any of the major streaming services, the chance are, that does stand in the way of change. You almost get into a sort of position where music, which has got this tremendous ability to reinvent itself, may not reinvent itself nearly so quickly, if at all.
How do you reconcile your kind of dance creativity, dance curatorial? I mean, I've just listened to your global warm-up playlist, which I was really enjoying, to be honest. It's very long. It's like 18 hours or something. Highly recommended for all the podcast listeners. And what's clear is that your curatorial approach is very musical. This is something I wasn't fully expecting because, of course, I associate what you do with house and trance, and a lot of that is quite musical. But you obviously, there's a lot more going on under the bonnet, as far as I'm concerned. And that's probably the reason why you've been so successful, is that you have a genuine musical appreciation, which is overlaid with this kind of dance genre thing. Who were your main influences when you were growing up musically?
Well, I've already told you one, and I'm really not making this up.
Oh, shut up.
I'm really, really not making this up for the purposes of now at all. I got into music very young because I had one of my cousins, who's a couple of years older than me, sort of turned me on to sort of punk and the sort of punk that evolved into indie when I was super young, when I was barely in my double figures of age. And then that when you start, and I was lucky enough to, then you could kind of go to gigs when you were very young. Now they simply didn't pay any attention to ages. I was brought up in Crouch End in North London. I went to the Rainbow Theatre constantly, saw some of the most iconic bands ever. The Clash, the Jam, Sham 69, Joy Division. But I think it's when you get out into the clubs, which again, I'm a tall lad, and when I was young, they didn't care how old you were as long as you vaguely looked 18. So I was out in clubs for probably about 15. And it's then when you start hearing, then you start living for that kick drum, and the kick drum is kind of everything. So which is why there were certain absolute moments of epiphany, like hearing We Don't Need No Fascist Groove Thing, or hearing like Blue Monday, which kind of took those kind of new wave sensibilities that I had when I was a kid, but applied that kick drum that is everything, and applied really kind of compressed synths to things. And I guess one's tastes evolve. In part, you as you become a tastemaker, got onto pirate radio, and you try and, if you like, nudge along the evolution of music in your own small kind of curator type way. But at the same time, you chart the evolution. And I think there were, in the dance music world from that era, there were kind of two types of DJs, or there's two sets of history. You were either a soul boy, which I wasn't at all, or you were kind of an indie kid, which I was very much. But they both met in the middle with house music. I remember going to the Hacienda again when I was super young. I mean, I did end up DJing the Hacienda in its latter years, but before I was DJing out of London much, I remember going to the Hacienda probably in like the mid 80s when I was really, really young, and hearing like the Psychedelic Furs played alongside hot school hip hop, played alongside the very early house records. And it was a very interesting way of charting the evolution of music. It's noting that other people's taste evolution was kind of was gravitating towards what I did. And I guess another good example, and I didn't quite kind of get it at the time, was what the Clash did, who went from being a straight up kind of punk band with conventional instruments into being quite dance orientated before they split up as well. So that I guess is my evolution before I became a DJ. And then of course hit acid house and became a rave promoter. And I mean, the great thing about being a promoter, and being a promoter is not an in to a music career that many people are lucky enough to be able to have. But if you want to do it when you're 16, because at 16 you probably got the biggest social circle you're ever going to have in your life, with a bunch of people who have got nothing to do. So that was my, that was the kind of evolution of taste, if you like, going into then of course, I mean, I suppose the other thing about being a DJ is that when you're a kid, when you're in your mid-teens, it's kind of quite cool to have the biggest record collection amongst your mates. But then as you become 18, 19, 20, 21, being a bit too much of a geek is actually a negative rather than a positive. And therefore you almost need to sell your services to finance your habit, to justify or your continued status as a geek. I've now sort of come to terms with the fact that I am a geek, and I can wear it as a badge of honor.
Do you, when you DJ live, do you do vinyl or digital?
I do digital, but I don't do digital mixing. I start with vinyl, then when the Pioneer invented the CDJs, which basically enable one to mix exactly the same way that one would mix vinyl, then I evolved to them, and now the same bits of hardware allow one to use a memory stick, but they can play multiple tracks simultaneously when they play memory stick. So I've sort of gone down the typical evolutionary path. There are kind of two different lanes of DJing. The other one of which is Serato and kind of laptop based, and the laptop does the mixing for you. And devotees of that lane will tell you, well, that enables us to fart around with the effects and focus on doing a slightly more creative type soundscape, if you like. I'm always a little bit cynical about that, because I think it's about the music first and foremost, and one runs the risk of being self-indulgent, and yes, there is a limited amount of crowds that probably really appreciate that, but I think majority of crowds probably don't.
I've got a very funny story. Do you know Rusty Egan?
Very well, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to DJ for him, yeah.
Oh, did you? All right. I love Rusty, and of course he's been on the podcast as well. And I've attended events where he's been DJing, and he's been employed to do a kind of 80s set, and basically it's that kind of audience who just want to hear the hits and maybe some 12-inch mixes of it, but you mix it sensibly and maybe beat match if you want to. No, not Rusty. No. He's doing like his own special, versions of loops from different, all this stuff. And the net effect I've found a couple of times when I've been listening to that is that I find it a bit frustrating, because it's a bit like a really good footballer just doing keepy uppies all the time. It's not really the point. It's more about engaging the audience emotionally, keeping them on the hook, and all that. I do a bit of DJing myself. I'm not an expert DJ at all, but I do know my stuff in terms of content. So you're doing some live stuff, aren't you, with a real band?
I am. I went to. I'd be the first to admit. I went. The influence was doing some curation of a lot of the orchestra shows that have been, because
Right.
Pete Tong has been probably the most commercially known about kind of orchestra show playing dance classics, but actually I've done quite a few with some of the very big sort of iconic club brands from Sheffield, Gatecrasher from Liverpool, Cream, Ministry of Sound. I'm doing the O2 actually with them at the weekends. But it was absolutely, and I've been the kind of DJ, the MC, I've done curation of that sort of stuff, and it's absolutely magical seeing people revisit songs that were just a more than part of their youth, just a part of them, played by an orchestra. But, and it's quite a big but, it's fairly limiting, because what the scope for an orchestra to kind of ad lib or do anything away from the score is nigh on non-existent. So what I wanted to do was almost take that a stage further and create, if you like, based around tunes that people know, but if you like a cross between a DJ mashup, a sort of funky jazz performance, and one of those orchestra shows. So it's like a 10-piece band where every track is more than one record mashed up, if you like, all played live with 2 or 3 vocalists, and then 8 or 9 other musicians, and then but then with loads and loads of crazy solos, whether they're kind of rock guitar solos, whether they're Spanish acoustic solos, whether they're kind of Bernard Edwards style bass, just bringing in lots of musicality, but meanwhile having that kind of syncopated backbeat. And it's quite interesting, because over the years I've played with a lot of live. I went through a period actually in the 90s of playing the trumpet when I was DJing, and I really wasn't a good trumpet player, but
That must have been a joy for the audience, yeah.
well, yeah, they laughed as much as they danced, I think. But it was in many ways it was it was a cathartic experience, because many DJs are frustrated musicians.
Yeah.
But anyway, just so understanding that kind of relationship between dance music, which is hypnotic, syncopated, but occasionally can kind of lack substance a little bit, and trying to create something that's got that substance and got that kind of performance. And we found musicians who are very adept at actually performing all on radio, all on radioed up. So the horn section jumps out into the crowd. It's all very sort of performance orientated. It's kind of a festival. It's a festival aimed show. We've probably done about 30 shows with the band.
Brilliant. And how long's the actual show? Is it?
Well, we can do anywhere between an hour and 2 hours. If you're doing a very packed out festival lineup, then we'll do a shorter one.
Right.
Or if we're doing a headline performance, do longer. So it probably represents about, I don't know, 1 in 5 to 1 in 10 of my gigs is with the band. The rest of the DJ show.
Fantastic. We did some British Electric Foundation shows with a live band, which is kind of, I suppose, similar to what you're talking about. So we started out with a recorded electronic music, and then we had to deconstruct it, reconstruct it with live instruments, and they were very successful. We did one at the Roundhouse where we had 9 different guest singers.
Which is kind of what you did originally with that project as well.
Precisely. So it's all kind of holistically connected, So yeah, I'm into all that kind of special. I mean, I'll tell you what I'm into. I'm into you had to be there as a phrase. I believe in the power of immediacy and the power of one-off events.
Yeah, I suppose that the
Commercially, but
yeah,
just
unfortunately, the corollary of that is people holding their camera phones in the air, is holding their phones in the air and recording stuff, which has been interesting anecdotally. And I've noticed it. Somebody said it to me anecdotally, and then I noticed it myself. Post COVID, post Freedom Day, and I've done about 40 gigs post Freedom Day, so I'm sort of vaguely qualified to comment. I think less people are holding their
oh, definitely less. I mean, we're in the middle. We're in the middle of a tour at the moment, and normally during Temptation, there's like I don't know, out of a crowd of 1,000, there'd be 200 people with phones up, and this time it's been more like about 20.
It's really interesting. It means people are actually experiencing it properly. And the one thing I never wanted to be was the old fart who says things ain't the way they used to be, and be a Luddite about anything. But the thing that frustrates me most is I suspect most people who take those photos will look at them once and they'll be forever consigned to an album that just won't ever be revisited. You know, if they were truly lifelong memories, then kind of fair enough. But it's kind of today's footage is tomorrow's digital chip paper. If you mix
Yeah. I had a kind of light bulb moment about that when I went to see Arctic Monkeys in Sheffield, and in the arena, and the whole of kind of, I don't know, 20 meters back from the stage, everybody was filming it. I mean, I couldn't see anybody who wasn't. It was ridiculous. There were a few people in the balconies and stuff, and in where I was sat, but at the front, it was insane. And the other interesting thing was, there was nothing coming from the stage to dissuade them. There was hardly any kind of. I love the Arctic Monkeys, by the way, my hometown, but there was no kind of attempt at emotional engagement with the audience from the band. So it was like a kind of passive experience for them. It was like watching a giant telly in ultra high definition. There was not very much in the way of push and pull between through the fourth wall or whatever you call it. I mean, we're the opposite of that with M17, I have to say.
Yeah, and I think quality of, dare I say, I think one of the reasons why I've been DJing for a very long time is because you've either got it as a performer or you haven't. You've either got, I don't want to say star quality because that sounds really vain. You've either got a personality behind the decks on stage or you haven't. And it's, I don't know, to go back to what you were saying about the Arctic Monkeys, I read that the Beatles stopped touring because very relatively early in their career, while still recording, because they couldn't hear themselves play over the volume of screaming. And that's when at that point the Beatles stopped touring. And actually, for their last 5 to 10 albums, they didn't tour them at all, and they were such global megastars it didn't make any difference to them. But there's almost a metaphor to that in the kind of camera, in the use of cameras.
Very interesting.
And but the great news is, and I've done some, especially in festival season between reopening on July the 19th and the end of September. I mean, I've done some really, really big shows. Probably biggest amount of play to would be 50 or 60,000 people. And you just didn't see that many cameras, which I hope it stays that way. I hope people just enjoy it. But at the same time, I don't want to sound like some old fart who sticks his head in the sand and pretends that things aren't different from the way they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that, you've got a very strong brand. People will turn up to your gigs. With M17, I think we're well liked and respected, but we have to rely on the fans to keep the interest level up so that we can sell tickets for more and more shows. It's one of the great kind of ironies of the last 20, 30 years. That the DJ world, in terms of ticket sales and revenue, is bigger in most respects than a lot of the a lot of the bands are earning. I mean, you can charge higher ticket prices, possibly even. Not at the very top. I'm not talking at the very top end.
Yeah, I guess the X's are lower for promoters in reality, because as I've learned for the first, having had a band for the first time for the past 3 years, just the backline cost of putting on bands is enormous. Whereas, yes, of course, if you put a multi DJ lineup on with some quite expensive DJs, it's not that cheap in terms of talent, but actually the equipment rental is negligible.
Negligible in comparison. Yeah, I saw a. Oh, what's it called? I was in Mexico City at one of their big festivals, and on a trade mission of all things, and got free entry. It was brilliant. Massive Attack were on with their big show and all that stuff, and there was a second stage which was a dance stage, and they had a Russian DJ called, I think he was called Gorbachev. It's a name. Anyway, he should be called Gorbachev, but it was a famous name from the past anyway. And it was literally, you tell me if this is typical, because I'd never seen anything like it. They had like a 25-meter high video wall, and it was about 40 meters wide. And he was on a platform, kind of halfway up the screen, which was also had video on the front. So it looked like he was hovering in midair, right? But in addition, God knows what his tech spec was. I have never seen, or even close, 50%. I've never seen so many moving lights in a show in my life. At times, you had to shield your eyes. It was so bright, and I was about 100 meters from the stage, and it was all on a DMX timeline. It was obviously, he was not mixing anything. He wasn't even playing anything. He was just going, and it was incredible. I just thought this is the ultimate configuration of that kind of world, where it's incredibly expensive. People are willing to pay a huge amount of money to put it on, but the actual person at the center of it is almost irrelevant. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think some of the bigger events are like that. I think it's good to I wouldn't deny that some of the bigger events can be like that, but I think it's good to do stuff that's not all about that. I think that's the reason why UK festivals. I always found that historically I've done festivals all over the place, of course, but I always found an interesting comparator was the Netherlands and the UK, because the Netherlands is a very famous producer, pardon the pun, of famous international DJs. There's loads of them. Household name DJs. And I always found you did a festival in the Netherlands and it had incredible staging, with exactly the kind of backdrop you're describing, production that was amazing, but then a crowd who just had dressed up so much they didn't have nearly as good a time. And then you sort of fly over to the UK, do a similarly sized festival which had crap production, but just the most amazing atmosphere. So, and I think that is the problem in certain markets, is that there is a confusion between, and I think Vegas is a bit like that, to tell the truth. That Vegas is not a market full of people who are very fond of music. It's not a mecca for music lovers. It's a mecca. Of course, it's considered to be one of the biggest party locations in the world, but it's more that kind of VIP culture, incredible visuals, incredible spectacle, but not a temple for people getting lost in the groove at all.
Yeah. I suppose Dubai's a bit like that, and all those kind of super luxury places.
Yeah, I think, Dubai can be. I go to Dubai fairly regularly. The only thing that gives Dubai a pass in that respect is there's so many British expats who have been ravers in their time when they've lived in the UK that they actually can get it. Whereas Vegas is full of, if you like, sort of mid Americans who've simply not been brought up on electronic music at all.
Right. How, it's a broad question, but, what are your favorite territories to perform in?
Well, Ibiza would be very high on the list.
Well, you've got your own.
Yeah, I've done a residency for many years. I've done probably 500 gigs in Ibiza.
Holy shit.
Yeah, no, more than.
You ever get bored with DJ?
The thing is, you can't fool anybody. If you give an indifferent performance, we all know it, you're only as good as your last gig, and indeed your next gig. And things have gone, continue to go really well for me. Just before March 2020 lockdown, things were just coming back to a real second peak for me. And then, of course, suddenly it was all whipped away. And if there was any doubt about loving DJing, God, did the pandemic and not being able to do it make it entirely clear. I just, I act probably more teenage than I should do at my age when in DJing, but even more so now. It's been incredible. And I think it's not just me. I think just the look on people's faces, they just began to appreciate things more. And maybe I'm sort of desperately looking for good news to come out of the COVID.
But the
pandemic.
Yeah, we had a similar situation. We did a Let's Rock North or whatever it was, and it was like 20,000 people, but people who'd not been to a gig for 18 months, right, or a festival, and these were older people, and the look on the people's faces was one of almost incredulity. You could see, obviously, everybody's been through hell. They've been to Vietnam and back, but it wasn't just that. It was like everybody's had a similar kind of experience of gratitude, I suppose, for the sense of communal joy. And that is something that I always give a kind of, we always have a huddle before we go on stage. And, I'm kind of like the guy who has to give the speech like the manager, and we always, for the first time ever, I said to the band, I said, look, normally we're just doing this and we're focusing on our performance and let's do it really well, essentially. And I said, this time it's not really not about us. It's about, accepting that energy that's coming from the audience and translating that into a performance. And I was completely right in that respect, I think. And I've seen it in the audiences. We're touring at the moment, and people are just very grateful,
Yeah, I mean, it's genuinely a positive thing to come out of the pandemic. It's not just clutching at straws, looking for small grains of kind of consolation after what's been so difficult. I mean, slightly changing the subject towards my legal career. I mean, the thing for me during the pandemic was that my legal practice, being not able to DJ at all apart from doing weekly live streams, legal practice could not have been more busy because there have been so many acts who'd lived, and their management who'd lived off the fat of the land from live, particularly in the electronic music space, where records are almost like a lost leader just to generate that lucrative live income. And suddenly that was taken away, which meant that managers who are, in many cases, very experienced people that I'd known for a long time, but were shockingly inexperienced when it came to the detail of a record deal or of a music publishing deal, suddenly had to think, shit, we've got to earn some money from somewhere. And that really kept my legal practice so buoyant. It was really difficult for everybody, but financially for not just the musicians, just the whole ecosystem.
Well, I suffered. I mean, probably lost a couple $100,000 over that period, just out of not being able to perform live, frankly.
Me too, yeah. But at least had the legal practice, which, so I didn't suffer in anything like how some of my DJ peers did who only DJ, and many of them fell through the cracks. Weren't the way that they set up their tax affairs meant they couldn't qualify for any benefit whatsoever.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, exactly. Same for me. You do a lot of DJing online on YouTube, and don't you? Is it YouTube or Facebook or whatever?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Presumably people love that shit, right?
They do. I mean, when at the height of the pandemic, when nobody could do anything, I was getting up to sort of 200,000-300,000 views for one live stream. Now I've continued to do it now. Now it's probably 1/10 of that, if not less, because people are going out and they've got many more options available to them. But I just did it and I still do it. I've been doing it live now for 20 months nearly, just live streaming every Saturday. Just because it's great to have that connection to people. And obviously my market is probably 30 to 60-year-olds in my market. So not every 30-year-old, and certainly not every 60-year-old, is going to be going out every weekend. They might go out once a month. I think a lot of them still do go out that much, but it's not like when you're in the 18 to 30 age group where you'd go out every week. So actually a live stream is a really vital connection to music.
Right. That's it's funny because we looked at doing live stuff. We looked at doing live concerts. We looked at the feasibility of it, of hiring a venue, doing it as a show, and selling tickets to it. And I just couldn't wrap. I couldn't understand how it could be done technically, but I just wasn't sure it was going to work. That people would pay for it. It just didn't really make sense to me. Anyway, but no, that's neither here nor there. I just thought I'd mention it. You've got a clothing range.
No, I don't so much anymore. No, I did. That's something I did do. I mean, that sort of slightly fell by the way. There were a few things in my life that fell by the wayside a little bit when I became a lawyer because there's only so many hours in the day. No, I did for a long time. That was something I was really interested in, did really well. But I sort of parked that because there's only so many hours in the day, really.
Could you not have sold it like,
Well, it was very much branded around me. I mean, I still do merch, like
right.
I don't know your Heaven 17 merch.
Yeah.
I mean, I still do merch, but that's done in a more conventional kind of rock merchandise type deal with somebody.
Yeah. Tell me about your songwriting then, because I know you've had various identities and you've written various songs. And how do you feel about your songwriting? I'm not passing any comment.
Oh,
I've not had a chance to listen to it, to be honest.
No, well, it depends. If you obviously the genre I come from has a lot of instrumentals, and one of the biggest records, in fact, the biggest record I did sales-wise was actually predominantly an instrumental. But then I've had 2 artist albums with songs. In fact, 3 artist albums really. It's quite. I think in terms of the actual conventional songwriting, I'm quite proud of some of the things I've written. The only thing that when I listen back to some of my older tunes, it's actually more the production. I think some of them are a little bit over busy, and I think all art. If I'd known this when I was younger, that art is arguably more about what you leave out than what you put in, and with music, finding the space for the elements to breathe is a real skill. So that's. If I listen, anything that I've done and I've made hundreds of records, so this doesn't apply to all of them, but the ones that I listen to, but I think, I could have improved it here and there. If I had, if them was now, tend to be ones where I've just tried to be too clever. I've tried to put too much in there, which isn't to say they're all like that. Some of them I'm very proud of, but the more successful ones tend to be the ones that are a little bit simpler and a little bit straight to the point.
Have you ever attempted or desired to create a kind of classic, 3-minute pop song with that kind of structure?
I was given, especially in the late 90s and early noughties, when there were a lot of big dance records that were signed by majors as instrumentals, and they then put vocals on top.
Oh, right.
They often pitched those to me, and I wrote. Actually, I've got some of the songs that I wrote now, and I think the songs are very good. But for whatever reason, they never got commissioned because they were pitching them out to like 20 or 30 different people. So I tried to do it in that respect. It depends what you mean by pop, because for me, something's got to be in sort of minor key stroke eerie key for it to kind of do something for me personally. And obviously a lot of pop is.
That's a bit pejorative, I would say. There's been some fantastic records that have been in a major key. I mean, pop records. I know you're saying it's in your personal taste.
What I like, exactly. Yeah, no, that's what I like, and it's difficult, and it's very difficult for me to write in any other anything other than rather a melancholic and sad key.
We could try it.
Yeah,
you could try it. What about Cole Porter, for fuck's sake?
Yeah, no, I mean, of course,
major minor. What about Let Me Go? That's
I think of many exceptions to that principle, but I think when you listen to dance music, the records I like tend to be a bit eerie, a bit melancholic. I know.
I've listened to a lot of your stuff today, and I'm not just saying it. It's very, sophisticated. A lot of it. I really like it a lot. I'm always interested, as And in all these podcasts, I always mention students because I learn a lot from them. I'm always interested in pushing people out of their comfort zone. I'm a provocateur. I think you could, if there's any interest to you, I think you'd be really good at that shit. So that's why I mention it. What else are we looking at? Your uncle's Rick Steen.
Rick Stein, yeah.
Rick Stein. Amazing.
Yeah, it's a funny old family that we are.
You like fish?
I do. I worked at his restaurant when I was 15 and 16 in my summers in Cornwall. He lived with my family when I was growing up for 3 years. So he's not just my uncle. He's very close to him, and he was actually a DJ, believe it or not, before he became a chef. That's right. And a lot of my early records I got from him. So there's a very strong connection. Cornwall's his main base, but he's truly passionate about what he does, and he's I guess beyond Jamie Oliver and Ramsay, he's probably the most famous chef in this country and in many other countries as well. So
he does lots of
fair play to my uncle, really.
Yeah, he does lots of great TV. I think his travel shows are very. I like his style of presenting, but I also think it comes from an authentic place of loving different styles of food, different cultures, and I think we need more of that shit. Less of walking into Marks and Spencers and every packet of food has got British on it. I'm so over that.
I'm into cooking. Having said that, I was on Celebrity MasterChef about 18 months ago, and I got eliminated in the first round. That is definitely not a bit of foul.
What did you cook?
Oh, the problem my mate was I just used ingredients I like and cooked stuff I liked. And I think you've got to be a bit more, got to be a bit more wanky than that. You got to kind of have a name for your dish and kind of justify it. Whereas for me, I just like certain key flavors with very fresh, sort of occasionally quite exotic ingredients, but they didn't buy it anyway. They didn't buy my bullshit, and off I went after.
But did they? All right, you can give us some inside dope on all this stuff. Did they not kind of? Does the production team not suggest some things to you?
No, not really. No, they not as far as I got in it. No,
right.
They were like, because they sound you out. I mean, I've done a few other of those kind of. I'm doing, dare I say, a Celebrity Chase for Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
And they will sound you out to make sure you're not completely inappropriate for the show. In the case the Celebrity Chase, that you've got some degree of general knowledge, and in the case of Celebrity MasterChef, that you've got some idea about cooking, and you're not just doing it being one of these Katie Price types who appears at the opening of an envelope.
Yeah.
And I enjoy cooking, and I.
Would you do I'm a Celebrity?
No, a multitude of reasons. One, I'm too busy with DJing to take 3 weeks out, and of course, with my even more so in my legal practice, where other people are relying on you, and you don't know when the next person's going to ask you to do something.
Right. Good.
But I also feel that's the only ones I've tried to do are those that are not awash with fairly desperate celebrities doing it so that they can appear in the pages of OK magazine and all the rest of it, which I would never do. I'm more doing things that are kind of fun. I've got plenty going on in my life that constitutes a career, so I don't money.
Celebrity Bake Off, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, I don't really eat desserts, otherwise I'd give that one a try. Yeah.
Okay. You're an Arsenal fan.
I am indeed.
For obvious reasons, because I'm a Sheffield Wednesday fan, I loathe Arsenal. You've been a source of much suffering over the years.
Yeah, albeit quite historical suffering.
Yeah. Well, it's very fresh in my mind, actually.
I went to the 2 cup finals when they played them.
But I was there too.
Wembley.
Oh, broke my heart. Anyway, that was a turning point for our club, and we were in League One now, so. And no, I don't really loathe Arsenal. I mean, I quite like the style of football that.
Your office is almost on the doorstep of.
Yeah, and my son's a Sheffield Wednesday fan. He grew up in Goonerland. It wasn't that much fun for him. They were all Gooners in his school. Anyway, I think we're getting close to the end of this. It's just absolutely zoomed by, isn't it? So all right, I know one interesting last thing is you clearly very good on the radio. You've had a very long radio career. What do you think the future is for radio? I mean, traditional radio.
Really good question, and it's one I think about a lot because I was on Radio 1 for 15 years. I'm on a couple of stations now, different, and in fact, I'm on a lot of radio stations with my global warm up. But I was on Radio 1 at a time when really it was one of the only channels of curation and one of the only channels of music. And now you've got that some people would argue that Spotify playlists are more important. Some would argue that they're equally important, but there's certainly many other channels of promo. And actually one hears in the electronic music sphere, you hear the name Kiss FM, which I started life on as a pirate station. I was on Kiss for a while in the 90s as well. So Radio 1 is generally got a much more difficult task on its hands. And I think, you asked about radio in general, but of course you really can't answer any question of that nature without a reference to Radio 1, because Radio 1 is probably the number one champion of new music in radio in the world. And I guess, whilst going back to what I said earlier, this very frightening 60,000 releases on Spotify a day, curators become all the more important, and those people capable of filtering that down to a palatable number of people. So yes, Radio 1 have lost some listeners. They haven't absolutely shed listeners like a lizard sheds its skin. They're fighting against more other curation channels, but so I do think radio is very important. I do think a passionate presenter who loves what they do. I loved Annie Mac. I think it's a real shame that she's no longer there.
Yeah.
I loved Mr. Jam as well on a more commercial level. So a couple of but it's all about that passion. And nobody can talk as passionately about music as a radio presenter. Because there aren't really TV shows that do equivalent, because not all good records have got a video to go with them.
No. One thing that actually I'm not going to talk about it because it's too negative to end on. Let's do the fun stuff, which is like the smash hits type, your favorite things. And I never warn people in advance about this because I think it's best to get a fresh response. So what's your favorite film, or one of them?
Goodfellas.
Great. Okay. Favorite book?
Lord of the Rings, I suppose.
Really? I've never read Lord of the Rings. Is it really good?
Yeah, it was just the first book that truly got me into reading, really, as a kid.
Oh, okay. TV show, current, past, box set, anything?
I'd have to say a tie between The Wire and Sopranos.
Yeah, The Wire's right up
or
there.
Breaking Bad, those three. I think it's really difficult to say which one's better, but they're the best three box sets.
Yeah.
Loving Succession right now as well.
A lot of people are into that. I've not watched it yet. I must have a look at that. Epiphanal moment in your life?
I think getting the call from Radio 1 when I was in my late 20s, because it was, if you like, when you're into music, the ability, while you're a DJ, you're trying to champion what you believe in and open your taste up to as many people as possible. Open up that larder and inviting people to come in and take a bite. And getting onto Radio 1 was the biggest larder imaginable.
Yeah. That's good. Good answer. Your favorite other musical artist or composer? Or one of them. It's almost an impossible question.
It is. There's just too many. There's just too many, and it changes week by week, really.
Right.
I mean, Hans Zimmer maybe for
yeah.
film soundtracks, which are incredible.
Who's your favorite other DJ?
Carl Cox.
Really?
Yeah, because the energy, because it's about stage presence and energy.
Yeah.
And you could have a DJ or a band playing the greatest music in the world, but if they're mediocre performers, the performance just ain't going to be as good. And
that's
Carl
true.
Cox is an exceptionally energetic, charismatic performer.
Wow, that's a great answer. Ambition unfulfilled.
it would be disingenuous to say that I haven't, that there's any really, because I've wanted to do everything I do. I've wanted to do. I've
Yeah.
kind of performed everywhere. I wanted to give something. I wanted to become a lawyer, do well at that, build up a client base of people I love, so I can view the world from the other side. Yes, of course, within each sphere of what I do, one could always do better, and you've got to wake up every morning. I think as a general philosophy in life, wanting to do better in everything you do, but I have fulfilled a lot of ambitions at the same time.
I'll tell you, mine is to do a full feature film soundtrack. Nobody's ever asked me, the bastards. And one day it'll happen. Which of your own work are you happiest with?
There were quite a lot, although I was being slightly negative about earlier on about some things I've done. There were quite a lot. There were just key records. I did a one side of one of my artist albums, which is called Split Personality by one of my non-deplumes, Highgates. It was one side a real banging dance album and one side a chill out album, and I'm really proud of that chill out album.
Yeah, I can see that in you. I can see, yeah. I mean, yeah, I can see a more reflective side and a kind of, come on, let's have it, oosh, oosh, oosh kind of thing. Finally, I have to ask everybody this question, even if they're not directly associated with electronic music, but you are. What's your favorite synth?
I suppose the Juno 106, because that was what a lot of my early records were made on. I mean, I was using it after it was a new bit of kit, but it's a really integral to dance music then and now.
Yeah, it's fat sounding, and just a workhorse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for doing it.
Cheers.
And I'll know where to come for legal advice in future. I don't need that horseful nonsense. All right, man. Have a great evening.
Say cheers.
I'll bump into you at Talyard, no doubt.
Yeah, as atoms collide.
Yeah. All right, man. See you later.
Cheers, mate.